My family treated me like a caregiver instead of a daughter, until I finally escaped their toxic grip. It's hard to admit, but I feel a strong sense of resentment toward her, even though it seems wrong to say. Ever since my sister was born, it's like I vanished from my parents' attention. I was 6 and excited about becoming a big sister, but that excitement faded quickly. The change happened slowly, but was undeniable. Suddenly, I found myself in the basement because she needed to be closer to Mom and Dad. That hurt. The basement was cold and eerie, and I missed the warmth of being near them. Nights down there were long and isolating. I could hear the family upstairs, and it made me feel completely disconnected, like I was an afterthought rather than a daughter. Losing my toys to her was another blow. She never meant to break them, but it happened all the time. I remember trying to explain how it made me feel, hoping my parents would show some sympathy or maybe even take my side, but instead all I got was, "She's younger, she doesn't understand. You're the big sister, you should be more patient." It felt so unfair. Those toys were my escape, and watching them get destroyed without anyone caring to fix it just made me feel invisible. The MacBook incident was the breaking point. I'd gotten it from school as a reward for my good grades, and then one day, it was destroyed. The school was upset with me for being careless, and my parents just piled on the blame. No one stopped to think that it wasn't really my fault. I was furious and hurt, but more than anything, I felt completely alone in handling the situation. It wasn't just about the laptop, it was about feeling like no one was there to support me. Balancing being a sister and having my own life is exhausting. I love my sister, of course, but it feels like my parents forget I'm still a kid too. Every time she needs something, I have to drop everything. No matter if I'm studying, hanging out, or just trying to relax. It's like I'm always on call without having volunteered for it. I can't even remember the last time I spent time with my friends without constantly checking my phone, worried I'll get a call from home needing me to come back. My life felt like it was in a constant state of waiting, always ready for the next crisis or request for help. When I finally decided to go see the new Spider-Man movie, it was a big deal for me. It had been so long since I'd done something, just for my own enjoyment. My friend Jake had been talking about it for weeks, and his excitement was contagious. I really needed a break, just a couple of hours to be a teenager, not a caretaker. So, I made a decision. Just this once, I'd turn my phone off and enjoy the movie without worrying about anything else. Just 2 hours. But when I walked out of the theater and turned my phone back on, it felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Missed calls and texts flooded in. I immediately called home, and the joy I had from the movie disappeared with each ring. When my mom picked up, her anger was clear. "Where have you been? We needed you an hour ago." I barely had a chance to explain myself. I rushed home, feeling guilty but also kind of angry. When I got there, it felt like walking into a storm. My parents were furious, their disappointment almost palpable. "We rely on you, and you just decide to disappear to watch a movie?" my dad said, his voice sharp, with my sister's background, noises cutting through. It was as if going to a movie was some kind of crime. I tried to explain that I just wanted a break, that I needed a few hours to myself, but they didn't want to hear it. "Your responsibilities here are more important than some movie," my mom added firmly. They grounded me, accusing me of being irresponsible, all over a movie. Sitting in my room afterward, it hit me. This wasn't really about the movie. It was about feeling trapped. Sure, I know my sister needs me, but sometimes I just want to do something normal without feeling guilty or punished for it. Being 18 and feeling like I'm not allowed to have a life of my own is tough. It's about being stuck in a role I never chose, about craving a little bit of normalcy in a life that feels anything but normal. I've always loved my sister, but in that moment I couldn't help but feel robbed of the simple joys that come with being a teenager. Friendships and carefree moments. Living in my house feels like being stuck in a never-ending cycle where everything revolves around my sister and her needs. Don't get me wrong, I understand that she needs a lot of care, and I want to support her, but sometimes it feels like I'm just another task on the family's to-do list. Help your sister, make sure she's okay. Can't you see that we're already busy with her? It's exhausting, feeling like nothing more than an extra pair of hands. It's as if I'm invisible unless they need something for her. This sense of being a servant in my own home is suffocating. I carry this burden around, and it's made me question my own value in the family. I feel more like a tool than a true member. Then there was that one week when I thought things might be different. I had been chosen to give a speech at a school event, and something about being recognized like that ignited something inside me. I worked hard on that speech, pouring my thoughts and emotions into every word. When my parents said they would come to watch me for the first time in ages, I felt truly valued. Finally, something about me was being acknowledged. I rehearsed my speech every night, imagining looking into the audience and seeing my parents there, maybe even catching them smiling with pride. The excitement felt like a rare light in the usual darkness of my life. Like this time, maybe things would be different, but they weren't. They missed it because of something with my sister. Once again, they blamed it on her. Standing there, ready to begin my speech and not seeing them, there was crushing. I pushed through it, my voice shaky, my hands trembling. I cried, not just for the speech, but for all the times I had felt overlooked. I made it through, and people clapped, but it felt hollow. The whole walk home, I couldn't stop the tears. I didn't want to make a big deal out of them missing it, but it hurt. It felt like a reminder that no matter what happens with me, I'll always be secondary. Walking home, all I could think about was how this pattern would never end. Talking about colleges with my dad had been something I was looking forward to. It started off fine, actually exciting for once. It felt like we were focusing on my future, on something that was about me. I was getting excited about the idea that maybe college could be my chance to get away from the chaos at home and do something for myself. We were looking through brochures, discussing majors and campuses. It was the closest to dreaming I'd gotten in a long time. Then my dad made that joke. Something about picking a high-paying major so I'd be able to take care of my sister when they're gone. He laughed, thinking it was just a harmless comment, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. All the feelings I'd kept bottled up exploded. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I started crying, then yelling, telling him how unfair it was that my entire life seemed to revolve around being my sister's caregiver. Every bit of resentment, every moment of feeling unseen and unappreciated poured out. I tried to make him understand how much I've had to give up, how everything always came back to what my sister needed, but they didn't get it. My parents just stood there, staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language, watching me unravel with no comfort, no apology, nothing. Their faces were cold, detached, as if they couldn't comprehend why I was so upset over a joke. That's when I realized they weren't ever going to listen. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and I've been here ever since. Here's the thing. I've been in here for hours, and they haven't even bothered to check on me. Not a knock, not a word, nothing. It's like my outburst didn't even matter to them. Sitting here, knowing that even my pain isn't enough, for them to see how much I'm hurting is incredibly lonely. It's like I'm stuck in this role they've assigned to me, and my feelings about it don't count at all. Am I wrong for wanting more than this? For wanting to be seen as something more than just a future caretaker for my sister? It just feels like no matter what I do, my life doesn't matter. I'm nothing to them, just insurance for my sister after they're gone. As hours turned into days with no word from my parents, something inside me shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that things needed to change. It wasn't just about wanting a break. It was about needing space to figure out my own life without constantly being dragged back into the same exhausting routine. I thought of the one person who always seemed to understand me, Grandpa. Without overthinking it, I packed a few essentials into a backpack late one night and left. I sent him a quick text to let him know I was coming, half expecting him to talk me out of it or call my parents. Instead, his reply was simple. Doors open. Staying with Grandpa has been eye-opening. It's not like we've had some profound heart-to-heart every day, but there's a calmness here that I haven't felt in years. He lets me just be. We've talked about college and my future, and for the first time in ages, I've been able to think about what I want without guilt or stress. Grandpa's been nothing but supportive, encouraging me to consider my own dreams instead of feeling bound by obligations. In just a week, I've started feeling more like myself than I have in years. We've shared simple moments together, meals, old movies, and stories from his younger days. It's been nice, peaceful, and freeing. I've even started researching colleges again, focusing on programs I'm genuinely interested in, instead of ones that might make enough money to support my sister in the future. Being here has given me a glimpse of what a balanced life could look like, and it's something I'm determined to hold on to. I also want to thank everyone for the overwhelming love and support this post has received. I never expected so many people to relate to or understand my situation. After reflecting on everything these past few hours, I've realized something important. I don't resent my sister. None of this is her fault. She didn't ask to be born with these challenges, and my frustration is really with the way my parents have handled everything. My parents did come to talk to me after my breakdown, but I couldn't bring myself to say much. I just cried and asked them to leave. They've since made arrangements for me to stay with Grandpa for a while so I can have some space to process everything. We've agreed to have a family discussion later this week, but for now, this distance is what I need. When I first got to Grandpa's house, I finally told him the whole story about why I broke down the way I did. His reaction was far more intense than I expected. I knew he'd be surprised, but he looked genuinely horrified. I explained how things had been at home, how I'd essentially become my sister's full-time caregiver while managing everything else, and how my dad's offhand comment about college and taking care of her forever had been the breaking point. Grandpa was furious, especially when he learned that my sister was supposed to have professional help that she wasn't receiving. He said a lot of things I won't repeat here, but the bottom line was that it wasn't fair or safe for me to be in this position. Grandpa was appalled that my parents had put so much on my shoulders and had kept the rest of the family in the dark. He was especially upset about the movie incident, saying it was the final straw that showed how unfairly I was being treated. Seeing Grandpa so angry was a big deal. He's usually laid back, so his reaction really hit home for me. He told me not to talk to my parents without him being there, which was honestly a relief. He assured me that he'd handle the situation and be there for any future conversations. But it wasn't just Grandpa. Over the next few days, I started hearing from aunts, uncles, and cousins. They were all checking in, making sure I was okay. They were just as shocked and concerned as Grandpa was. For the first time, I feel like I'm not alone in this. I finally have a support system, and it's making all the difference. It turns out my parents had been lying about having a professional caregiver for my sister. They had even been taking money from the family under the pretense of paying for this non-existent caregiver. When the truth came out, everyone was furious, especially since it was about something so serious. This past week has been a whirlwind. It's been tough, no doubt, but also surprisingly eye-opening in a positive way. Discovering all these hidden truths about my parents was overwhelming, but there's been an unexpected silver lining. My extended family stepping up in ways I never expected. Grandpa has been at the heart of it all, determined to make up for what he keeps calling lost time. He's been encouraging me to reclaim my life, to just be a teenager again. It's strange, but also really refreshing. He keeps nudging me to hang out with friends or simply relax and do things I enjoy, stuff I haven't done in what feels like forever. It's like he's on a mission to help me rediscover parts of myself I'd forgotten. And it's not just Grandpa. My aunts and uncles have been incredible too. They've been visiting frequently, bringing over food, checking in, and really listening. They're going out of their way to show that they care, and it's made me feel genuinely supported for the first time in ages. It's overwhelming, but in the best possible way. For once, I'm not just the sister or the caretaker. I'm simply me, and that feels amazing. Then came the conversation with my parents on Saturday night. To call it a disaster would be an understatement. I went in with cautious hope that maybe we could start to fix things, but it only made everything worse. They actually admitted to some deeply messed up things I can't even bring myself to write down here. But the worst part? Not one word of apology. Instead, they doubled down, saying that I was essentially born to be my sister's caretaker. My dad even said that outright, like my entire purpose in life was tied to her. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Everything I'd learned, the lies about the caregiver, the money they claimed they were spending but weren't, all of it spilled out. I confronted them, called them out on everything, but they just dodged my points and made excuses. By the end of the conversation, things felt even worse than before. It was like hitting a brick wall. I had gone into that discussion holding on to a tiny shred of hope, but I left feeling like it had been completely extinguished. After that, I made a decision. I'm done. I had a long conversation with Grandpa and my uncle last night, and we all agreed that it's best if I don't go back. Today is the day I officially move in with Grandpa. It's a strange feeling, this huge change, but it also feels right. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking control of my own life. I've also decided that when I graduate high school, I'm leaving the state for college. The idea of starting fresh somewhere far away is exhilarating. One of my aunts has been especially supportive through all of this. She told me that instead of giving money to my parents for my sister's care, she's going to send it directly to me now. It'll become my college fund, which feels like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. As for my parents, they've called a couple of times since that awful conversation, but if you're thinking they called to apologize or say they miss me, think again. All they've wanted to know is when I'm planning to come back home. It's like they're not even trying to understand why I had to leave in the first place. I know this is going to be a massive change, and honestly, I'm scared. But at the same time, it feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time, I'm making decisions for myself, and there's something so liberating about that. Today feels like the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Choosing not to return to my parents wasn't easy. There's this uneasy knot in my stomach, but I think with time, that feeling will fade. The support I've been receiving from the rest of my family has been incredible. Even though this is such a big step, their love and encouragement have made it a bit easier to cope. Still, the harsh reality is that I've essentially lost my parents through all of this. That realization hits hard. It's a lot to process, and sometimes I catch myself wishing things had turned out differently. But amidst all this, I've come to realize something important. I don't hate my sister. The anger I thought I felt toward her was misplaced. She's not to blame for how our parents chose to handle things. I love her deeply. more than words can express, and it was wrong to project my frustration onto her. I hope one day I can make amends for that. For now, though, leaving is the right choice for me. I need this time to discover who I am, away from all the chaos. It's about finding my own path and defining myself outside of everything I've been through. It's going to be a journey, but I feel ready for it. Edit. Thank you all so much for your support. I wish I could respond to every single one of you, but my lunch break only lasts so long. I'll post an update tonight about how the move went. Until then, just know that your kindness means more to me than words can express. Moving out felt surreal. Grandpa and my uncle were there with me every step of the way, helping me pack up my life into boxes and bags. We made sure to grab all the essentials, my birth certificate, social security card, and anything that held meaning to me. It felt strangely official, like I was gathering the pieces of my old life to start a completely new one. As for my parents, they stayed mostly silent. My dad left with my sister shortly after I arrived, leaving just my mom behind. She hovered in the background, watching us pack. The atmosphere was awkward and tense, and she barely said a word. But just as we were about to leave, she finally broke down. Through tears, she told me she loved me and that she would miss me. After days of silence, hearing those words hit me differently. I hugged her and said goodbye. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Now, sitting in my new room, at Grandpa's house, I keep replaying that moment in my mind. Did she mean what she said? After everything, it's hard to be sure, but I want to believe she did. For now, all I can do is focus on moving forward. Maybe, with time, my parents, and I can find a way to rebuild our relationship.